SCP-092 Item SCP-092 Object Class Safe Special Containment Procedure. The 3125 instances of SCP-092 are to be held in individual suitable for containing non-anomalous audio compact disc CDs and stored in a standard inanimate object lockers at Site-37. Each instance is to be individual numbered with a permanent marker. Testing of instances of SCP-096 is to be done in soundproof rooms. Only one instance of the SCP-092 may be examined at a time. Only the class personnel are to listen to previously unexamined instances of SCP-092. Research proposals which involve non-D class personnel listening to instances of SCP-092 require written approval from Site Command. The cadaver of SCP-092-B is not currently considered anomalous, except by association, and is preserved in the Morgus freezer at Site-19. Description: SCP-092 is a site of 300 and 125 audio CDs, each labeled the absolute best of the fifth dimension, and marked with the name of the 31 performers who have at various times have been a part of American singing group The Fifth Dimension. Each instance of SCP-092, when played in a standard SD player, would produce a distinct anomalous effect upon all individuals within hearing range. The anomalous phenom will last 74 minutes, the duration of a standard audio CD, during which time the listeners will be unable to leave hearing range or to shut off the CD player or otherwise interrupt its function, as listeners will engage in synchronous vocalization of the phrase. Wow, that was really cool. Synchronized vocalization has been observed in non-anglophone pre-verbal infants, in unconscious individuals, paralyzed individuals, and individuals physically incapable of speech due to laryngeal, lingual, and/or buccal damage. The anomalous properties of each instance of SCP-092 are theoretically and conceptually linked to the number 5 dimension and/or the members of the fifth dimension, as or 871 instances of SCP-092 have been assessed, and their anomalous properties formally described. See the document SCP-92 W83 for a full list, or below for representative sample. Instance anomalous property. Listeners experience quintuple visions for all moving objects. SCP-092-041. Listeners' bodies exude pentagonal crystals of elemental boron chemical element 5 #5 crystal cease materializing upon conclusion of CD but do not dematerialize. Listener's body exhausts pentagonal ingots of elemental manganese chemical element 25 or 5-2 ingots cease materializing upon the conclusion of CD but do not dematerialize. Listeners succumb to acute manganese poisoning within 24 hours. Listeners' bodies exude pentagonal nodules of elemental cesium chemical element 55. All listeners killed by cesium burns within 8 minutes. SCP-092-079. Listeners become physiologically 5 years old. SCP-092-018. Listeners become psychologically 5 months old. SCP-092-081. Listeners become psychologically 5 weeks old. SCP-092-082. Listeners become psychologically 5 days old. SCP-092-087. Listeners up spontaneously become 5 months pregnant. Pregnant from spontaneously miscarry upon conclusion of CD short test. All male listeners succumb to massive internal venous. As to 3 female listeners, surviving female succumb to organ damage within 4 days. Post-mortem genetic analysis shows that all fetuses were identical and are not related to the listeners. Listeners experience unbearably painful facial spasms characterized by constant chewing and biting motions, plus symptoms of trigeminal neuralgia caused by inflammation of the fifth cranial nerve. During the initial test, all listeners better themselves into unconsciousness against walls of testing chamber in attempt to escape the pain. Listeners' bodies are pentas radically producing 5 disconnected segments which remain alive and mobile. Listeners' listeners' bodies are pentasecond laterally producing 5 disconnected segments which remain alive and mobile. SCP-092-177. Listeners' bodies are pentasecond longitudinal producing 5 disconnected segments which remain alive and mobile. SCP-092-178. Listeners' body are pentasecond axially producing 5 disconnected segments which remain alive and mobile. SCP-092-200. Listeners are transformed to a site on surface of Himalaya, fifth most massive of Jupiter, fifth planet from the Sun. Listeners are returned upon conclusion of CD but succumb to the combined effect of hypothermia, hypoxia, and radiation poisoning within 3 hours. Jesus, how long is this? SCP-092-256. Listeners are converted into two-dimensional form. SCP-096. SCP-092-2071. Listeners spontaneously lose 5 teeth each. Teeth do not regrow after conclusion of CD. SCP-092-2072. Listeners spontaneously lose 5 teeth each. Teeth do not regrow after conclusion of CD. SCP-092-273. Listeners spontaneously lose 5 fingernails each. Fingernails do not regrow after conclusion of CD. Listen, SCP-092-274. Listeners spontaneously lose 5 toenails each. Toenails do not regrow after conclusion of CD. Eyes are functional and have the same color as the listener's original eyes. SCP-092. I need a water. SCP-092-279. Listeners experience topological deformation such that their height becomes damn. And their height becomes the circumference of their waist. And vice versa, deformation reverts at the conclusion of CD. This appears to be an exchange between listeners' dimension of height and dimension of width. SCP-092. 185. Listeners sneeze 5 times per minute for the duration of the CD. SCP-092-286. Listeners bench 5 times per minute for the duration of the CD. SCP-092-287. Listeners hiccup 5 times per minute for the duration of the CD. SCP-092-288. Listeners cough 5 times per minute for the SCP-092-350. Listeners find themselves within the 2010 Lars von Trier film dimension where they are able to interact with the settings but not affect the action of the character. Since the dimension is only 27 minutes in duration, the effects within the film repeat 2.74 times. SCP-092-360 listeners find themselves within the 93 Eastern Terrace daughter who cross over dimension in time, where they are able to interact with settings but not affect the action of the character. But since the two parts of the dimensions in time are only 30 minutes, the durations, the events within the episodes repeat 5.69 times. SCP-092 370 listeners find themselves within 1963 Italian film Amor in Quattro Dimensioni, where they are able to interact with the setting but not affect the action of the characters. SCP-092 397 listeners experience 5 moments in the life of Alan Shepard, the fifth man to walk on the moon. SCP-092 399 listeners experience random moments in the life of James Monroe, the fifth President of the United States. SCP-092 400 listeners experience random moments in the life of Mackenzie Bowell, the fifth Prime Minister of Canada. SCP-092 401 listeners experience random moments in the life of Edward Siagier, the, the fifth Prime Minister of Jamaica. The listeners experience random moments in the life of Charan Singh, the fifth Prime Minister of India. Listeners experience random moments in the life of Helen Hayes, the fifth winner of the Academy Award for the Best Actress. Listeners are physically transformed. SCP-092 466 listeners are physically transformed into dimension of the original lineup of the fifth dimension as they were at the time of group establishment in 1986. Listeners physically transform into members of the original lineup of the fifth dimension as they were at the time of the original group dissolution in 1975. Listeners were physically transformed into the moments of the original lineup of the fifth dimension as they were at the time of the original group's reunion. The listeners are physically transformed into the members of the original lineup of the fifth dimension as they are today. Listeners who transformed into Ron Townsend 1933-2001 resume their original forms after conclusion of CD but do not resurrect. When an instance of SCP-092, oh thank God it's over, thank God. When an instance of SCP-092 is inserted into the CD drive of a personal computer, its files can be accessed without triggering the anomalous effect. Examination of the file indicates that CD has a different content. All content is audio material by or pertaining to the fifth dimension and its individual members. In addition, to all known comically released songs, files contain live performance, practice seasons, audition, media reviews, and personal conversation. In May 5th, on May 5th, an unidentified man, henceforth SCP-092, be carrying two suitcase approaches from front gate guards at Site 19 stated that he wishes to surrender himself and his anonymous creation into Foundation custody. The contents of his suitcase are confiscated and classified as SCP-092. SCP-092-B has transformed to Site-37 for interrogation. During interrogation, SCP-092 revealed a thematic connection, 5 dimension and the 5th dimension, between all the instances of SCP-092 and then committed suicide. Access required level 4 security clearance and or higher. Footnotes 1. Requests have been made to use SCP-092-200 to send exploration team equipped with environment and suits to Himalaya approval is pending. D09 to 7714 would last an eye in a fight prior to entering in Foundation custody, grew 4 extra eyes when listening to SCP-092 278. 3. Although SCP-092 was taken into Foundation custody in Frontier began production on Dimension in the 1980s with the intention of continuing for 30 years. Thank you guys for watching, and, I hope you liked that video. It was just reading as I search up a random SCP on Google, and yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next time. Subscribe if you want more, turn on notification if you want more, and then comment if you want more. Anyways, goodbye, and I'll see you guys in the next time. Goodbye.